Hello, thank you for joining me today. I'm Jan Clothier of Thinking Stamping and I'm an independent Stampin' Up demonstrator based in New Zealand. And today I'll be sharing with you how I made this card using the Dainty Delight bundle, which is out of the January to April 2023 mini catalogue. The Dainty Delight bundle is my favourite out of the catalogue, and there were many bundles to choose from, but this is the one I like. Hard to go past florals with a lovely set of sentiments. This was actually the first thing I ever made with this set, and I've had quite a few questions about it, so I thought I'd share with you how I made it. So we'll start with what do you need, and on that point, if you see anything that I use today that you like and you live in New Zealand, you're more than welcome to purchase it from me. There's a link to my online store in the video description below this video, and through the end card links at the end of this video. So obviously the Dainty Delight bundle is a must. We'll just pop that over there. In terms of paper, it's actually quite light on supplies. There's a base, and I've chosen Bermuda base. So as always for me, my standard card base with the width of an A4 piece of paper, 21 centimetres, scored at 10.5, and I cut it at 14.8. Now, if you're not a metrics person, just use whatever your standard card size base is and sort of adjust the layers accordingly. So there's my Bermuda Bay base. Then I've got a mat in Coastal Cabana, which is 0.5 centimetre smaller than the card front. So it is 14.3 that way and 10 that way. And then a piece of white, basic white, which is 0.5 centimetre smaller again. So it's 13.8 by 9.5. Now I've got another set of those, the Cabana and the basic white in the same dimensions, which I'm going to use for the inside. So I'll just pop that away because we don't need that yet. And the other thing you need is some watercolour paper, some Fluid 100 watercolour paper. Now to make it easier, I've cut mine into 3. A large piece, this is about, I don't know, what is it, 15 centimetres by 10. And then I've just got 2 smaller ones, they're about 7.5 centimetres square to make the various things for the flowers and the leaves, and we'll deal with those shortly. Before I get onto that, I'll just pop that over there. Before I get onto that, I think I will talk about how the aperture, how you cut the base here. So with one of your pieces of basic white, I'm going to start with doing the sentiment, because if you muck up the sentiment because it's stamped directly on, you need to get the sentiment out of the way, because if there's a bit of an error, then you haven't wrecked everything. So the way I work it is, when I block up my stamps, I put them on the grid paper and I try and line up the bottom. I try and line up the bottom of the words with the bottom of the block. And then my theory is that if I line up the bottom of the block parallel with the paper, then it will be straight. So we'll just see if that works. Yes. So then we shall move on to step 2, which is to get one of these lovely stylish shaped dies, beautiful stitched circle dies, and I'm going to take the second largest one and I'm going to place it where I want it. And then I'm going to pop off and die cut it, except that because I was organised, I already have one. So what I've done, there is my stitched circle. I've taken it away and I've now got my sentiment and I've got my little circle. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to take the largest circle. I'm going to take my mat, I'm going to line it up as if it was attached. I'm going to get my pencil and just run around there. And then I will take the larger die and I'm going to go and cut that out. And of course, because I'm organised, I've actually already done that. So we've now got our 2 pieces, and when we eventually get around to lining them up, so you've got a bigger gap around there. Okay, so we could attach those already so that that's ready to go. Now, when I do this, I'm not going to put very much effort into gluing around here, because when I am assembling my flowers, I want to be able to poke things in underneath. So I'm only going to glue around the bottom. Okay. Or sorry, not the bottom, around the edges. Okay, and then because I've used glue, I've got the infamous wiggle room to straighten it up. And then we can just pop that aside until we need it later on. Now, the watercolouring is a little bit time consuming, but not too much. So I'll show you what I did. I've got just an old microfiber cloth that I use, or you could use a paper towel or something to just protect your work surface. Now I'm going to start with my largest piece of watercolour paper. I'm going to get a block and I'm going to start with Bermuda Bay, a little dribble of Bermuda Bay, and a little touch of Coastal Cabana. And I'm going to just pop those out of the way, and I'm going to use the largest, fattest of the water painters. And I'm going to start by just running some water all over the paper because I want the ink to run rather than sit directly onto the paper. And I'm going to start with the lightest one. Now, the more water you put, the lighter it's going to be. So you can go light. If you want it to be heavier, well, great, just don't water it down as much. We'll go back in for a second layer. And then I'm going to add in the Bermuda Bay and let that go. It doesn't matter too much if you get it streaky. All that you really want is some variations in colour. So just let it do what it likes, and decide where you want it heavy and where you don't, and then just pop it off to the side to dry. And then just going to wash out my brush, move that off to the side where I don't need it. And next I'm going to go for a little bit of Calypso Coral and a little bit of crushed curry, although if I had Daffodil Delight I would have used that, but I don't have a Daffodil Delight re-inker. So I'm going to use one of my littles. Same deal, wet it, just so that you're not putting the ink onto dry paper, because if you put it onto dry paper it acts like paint, it just sits where you put it. But if it's got a layer of water, then it's going to let the ink run over it. And some yellow. It doesn't, because you're aiming for a blended effect, it doesn't matter if the ink's mixed together a bit on your brush. Go over the join line so you get a nice smooth transition, and that one can pop over there. Just mind its business while it dries. And finally, the last one, I want it to be a little bit paler again. And since I don't actually have a Pale Papaya re-inker, because I'm going to use Pale Papaya and Calypso Coral, I'm going to have to do it a different way. So I'm going to ink my block with Pale Papaya. Then I'm still going to wet my paper, so we'll just run that over there like that. And then I'm just going to pick up the ink, and you can see the effect is much, much lighter. And of course, if you'd wanted your Coastal Cabana and Bermuda Bay to be lighter than mine was, then don't use re-inkers, use the ink pads in this manner. It gives you the same effect, but more subtle when you use the ink pads rather than the re-inkers. So we'll do it again because I do want a bit more colour than that. And then because I've done it with the ink pad rather than the re-inker here, I am just going to do the same thing with the Calypso Coral. And that will give me, you'll see how much it gives you a paler effect than using the re-inker would. But doing it this way also, if you wanted it darker than that, then simply just get some more ink on your block and block it in. Okay, so now I've got my 3 different pieces. I've got a nice subtle one, I've got a stronger one, and I've got my bluey greeny one, and they're just off to the side drying. Okay, so now here are all the die cut pieces that I've done. So 2 of the sprays, 2 of these little larkspurs, and 3 of these hollyhocks. Now the hollyhocks come out of the die in 4 pieces. So you want to keep track of them. Make sure you put them off to the side somewhere where you're not going to lose all the little bits. So now the fun begins, which is, I think, the fun, but anyway, the arranging. So what I've done here is I've already set up my base. So I've attached the two pieces with the aperture, the basic white and the Coastal Cabana, to the Bermuda Bay base. When I attach, don't forget, when you attach, don't put glue around the circle, because I want to be able to lift that up and tuck pieces into it. And if you glue around there, then it becomes quite tricky to do so. Now, when you are dealing with intricate die cuts, my favoured method of dealing with them is silicone mat, bit of glue, and an old piece of sponge. So I'll have that ready. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this up into pieces. So I want a piece, I don't know, about that long, which I think will just tuck in there, because you see we want it to look like it's growing out of the page. So I'm just going to trim that so it looks more like a leaf, and we'll pop that one. He doesn't look quite as good, does he? So maybe we'll do this one. We'll do this one next, perhaps. Trim him. And I think one will go in the centre. And one off to the side. Perhaps I just need to make it look like a better leaf. There we go. A bit of pruning. And actually, I think to make it look even better, I think it would look better if I went down that low. So we'll just shave him off, make him look like a leaf. And there he is. There's our the basis of our little garden scene. And I'm just going to start and assume that that's right. Now, if I wasn't perhaps on video and trying to, not spend absolutely more time than I have to, I might have faffed around with that a little bit more. And if you're making one, of course, you can spend as long as you like getting it going. So we'll pop that in. Oops. Just lift it up, lift up, tuck in, and just make sure you've got him climbing out of the frame. And then same deal, we'll get the sponge. We'll just dib on a bit of glue at the back. Doing it this way, you do lose some of the wiggle room, because the glue isn't on as thickly, so it doesn't wiggle the way glue normally does. But the payoff for that is, of course, you haven't got all of that glue oozing out all over your card front. Now, when I was making my original card, I did muck around with this tiny little die here, this one here, which makes a stem. And that stem, you get about 1 to 2 millimeter stem, and I painstakingly attached all of the hollyhocks to it and then attached it to my card. And in the end, I decided that really that was a waste of time, because in the long run, you couldn't tell that's what I'd done. So I am not going to do it this time. I'm going to just start adding in my flowers, and if I need to add in some more stem because it doesn't look good, well, I will, but I'm not just going to do it if I don't have to. So we'll pop that on. And in order to do the hollyhocks, I'm going to give myself a bit of glue smeared out. I'm going to do it slightly differently. Because they're such little pieces, I'm going to use my Take Your Pick tool. Because that little sticky end is worth its weight in gold in scenarios like this. Because you can just pick it up, smear a bit of glue on, and place it where you want. Boom. Okay, and you can see that the Take Your Pick tool really does make it very, very easy to deal with those tiny little pieces. Now all that's really left to do is the embellishments and the inside. So for embellishments I used some basic rhinestones to just add a little bit of detail to the centre of the flowers. The first time I made this card I went through and I put little rhinestones on the centre of each of these hollyhocks. And I just felt it was a little bit too much. So I've gone for just 3, 1 on each stem, just to kind of draw attention to the flower centres. But, you know, if you're making one of these, you can play around with however many you want to put, like ranging from 0 to, 1 on every flower here. Highly up to you. The other thing that I did was I used some of these beautiful brushed brass butterflies, which I think are a perfect marriage for the Dainty Delight bundle. They come in 2 sizes, the big and the little. So we'll have a big. I think we'll put them here to draw attention to the sentiment. Perhaps another big, because there's a nice little gap for them. And a dinky little tiny one. And pop them up there. Okay, and so there we have it, a beautiful watercoloured die-cut flower arrangement that looks like it's literally growing out of the page. I think the best is yet to come is a lovely sentiment, because it's great for a milestone birthday or a wedding or an engagement, whatever you like really. It's one of those sort of sentiments which suits all sorts of occasions. For the inside, I'll show you what I did on my original. I used a mat of Coastal Cabana, a piece of basic white, and just one of the sprays out of the Dainty Delight set. I think it's that one there that I used. You could colour it if you wanted to, or you could add in another sentiment, or you could just leave it with plenty of writing space, whatever you like. The other thing I did with this one, which was my very first one I made, is that matte layer I embossed with the painted texture embossing folder, and you can sort of see it gives a little bit more detail to it, so that's another thing you could do to step it up a bit further. I decided that I quite liked the plainer look because it lets you focus more on the flowers, but it's just a matter of personal taste, and that's certainly an option you could take. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed looking at that card with me. If you live in New Zealand and you've seen anything that I've used that you'd like to add to your craft stash, don't forget that you can shop with me, and the link to my shop is in the video description below. I'm always happy to answer questions, so you can contact me through my Jan Clothier Independent Stamping Up Facebook page, or my blog, Thinking Stamping. The details of those things are at the end card and in the video description below. Don't forget to subscribe if you've liked what you've seen, so you don't miss whatever I do next. And above all else, enjoy. Happy stamping.